everybody. Good morning, Devin.
Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I want to welcome you and our audience to Rise and Elevate, episode number 8. So this is monumental for us because it's part of our tagline and our mantra, the Rise and Elevate, using the infinity symbol to close out our podcast name. So today is an episode where we get to bring in a colleague, a friend, someone that has gone through many trials and tribulations. And as our kind of tagline goes with Rise and Elevate, we want to share the message of hope and that a rising tide lifts all ships. So without further ado, Devin, if you could share your Devinized version of the bio for our next guest.
Of course. Thank you, Tom. Everyone, Tom and I are beyond excited to welcome today's guest to Rise and Elevate. Scott Kelsey has crafted an extraordinary journey that's, inspiring as it is diverse. After an impressive 5-year career as a professional hockey player, Scott relocated to Princeton, where he's built a thriving life with his wife, Larissa, and their 2 wonderful children, Greta and Alexander. Professionally, Scott has made his mark as a mortgage professional with over 2 decades of experience. Leading by example, he was able to spearhead a team that funded over $170 million in volume last year alone. His exceptional performance has earned him recognition as a top producer, both in New Jersey and on the national stage. But Scott's impact doesn't stop there. He is the founder and CEO of Shareapy, really a innovative platform dedicated to enhancing mental well-being and fostering personal and professional growth. Through online gatherings, Shareapy provides a transformative space for individuals to connect, grow, and thrive. Scott's story is a testament to resilience, vision, and a commitment to making a difference. So Scott, welcome to Rise and Elevate. We can't welcome to dive into your journey. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Devin. Hi, Tom. And I appreciate the offer to be on this podcast and the incredible introduction. I don't know if I actually feel worthy enough to be introduced in that fashion, right? I love it. And I do appreciate it. And Tom, thanks for reaching out. After all these years, it was a tremendous pleasure to work with you back in the day. And I'm really glad we connected and I have the opportunity to share a little bit about myself and kind of what we're doing here with Shareapy.
Absolutely. Scott, I believe that things happen for a reason. And as it would be, taking a little break and scrolling through Instagram, I saw your most recent post about Shareapy, driving in your car, sharing a little message of connecting. And I made the decision to just reach out and connect and invite you to be a part of our Rise and Elevate podcast. So thank you for joining us today and taking some time out of your day to share this with us.
Well, thank you. And I'll just try to be quick on this, as I've made, and we'll discuss a little bit as we talk, a conscious decision, probably 5 or 6 years ago to accept any and all offers to be able to share my experience and understand just how, and hopefully how that helps others go through their daily life challenges.
Right. Well, because we all share this journey of life, right? And although we think of, our life of 70, 80, 90, 100 years, we're but a grain of sand in the big scope of time, right? So, part of what we do here at Rise and Elevate is we want to talk about some successes and failures that people go through. And, failures can be a setback that are momentary, or they can be lifelong setbacks, right? And what Devin and I have decided to do, and what attracted me to inviting you on here, is how you've changed your course in a storm that life created for you that really gave you a new lease on life and a kind of different opportunity. And while it's heavy sometimes to talk about what happens to us, that change can help us to blossom. And I think, those successes and failures are defined in many ways by society, by people, by family. But the one thing that, over the time that I've known you, we've always been resilient. We had to change with the mortgage tide or the life and things, but you went through something pretty traumatic. And I'd love for you to talk about that low, because I believe it brought you to a new high. And that's the fall that you took, the traumatic brain injury that you experienced.
Yeah, no, and thanks for that. So just about 7 years ago, so in April 7th, actually, to be exact, in 18, I had a rather traumatic fall downstairs at home. Fortunately, was able to be found in time where things didn't get much worse. And from that began kind of a little bit of self-discovery, a lot of thinking. I had to kind of pause on a lot of things, work, I just had to slow down, to let the brain heal. So from that basically came the idea or the understanding that I needed to work on some things that I hadn't been working on personally over the years, because like a lot of other people out there, I pushed them off to the side and felt like I'll deal with that later. Right. Life, I'm blessed to have garnered some pretty good success in the mortgage career, in my playing career, and all that kind of came somewhat, to a point where I needed to think back about how blessed I was to achieve that success and have those experiences and meet people like yourself over the years. But I really needed to do a hard, deep dive into myself and figure out what I needed to work on to just be a better version of myself.
I love it. Scott, you could have taken that as a way to kind of bail out on life, right? But you chose it to energize and create more and improve the relationships of your family, improve the relationships in your career. And as a result, that's when you kind of came up with the brainchild for Shareapy and Edge for Athletes, right?
Yeah, through some prompting with friends that knew of some struggles that I was going through on top of the brain injury, they started to point me in direction of other people that were local, some friends of theirs that had been through similar struggles, whether it's a brain injury, whether it's some mental health issues that I had kind of pushed aside for decades. And just talking to those people and getting that peer support from people that had similar shared experiences, I began to realize just how impactful it was for me on my journey. And from that, it was almost like, hey, what's the holdup with sharing more about my story, right? And through getting more actively involved in the mental health scene and being an advocate for some entities here in New Jersey and nationwide, I realized just how powerful being able to share similar stories with people and experiences could help not only the person on the receiving end, but me, myself as well.
So Scott, I just want to clarify something from your tragic accident. Shareapy was able to happen. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. From that was just kind of like that kind of inflection point that, wow, there's something more than what I had thought by just saying, hey, let's get together with somebody and talk about, having a traumatic brain injury. There was something more to it. Right. And I dove deeper into it and realized that this needs to be something that other people can experience, because it was truly healing, and it continues to be truly healing to the things that I needed to work on.
So you find that sharing those stories with others helps them to heal, and it also helps you to heal along that journey as well.
Yeah, I'm not one to go into all the science behind, shared lived experiences, but you can take a look, and there's a lot out there. And fortunately, there's a lot of people trying to, bring peer support and the ability for people to share those experiences in a controlled kind of warm environment where people, tend to, or at least in our experience and what we've been doing for the last few years, where people tend to open up a little bit more. And it doesn't need to be extreme challenges. It's just the everyday struggles and processing life itself, in which I feel that people want to be heard and understood. And I believe that's what we provide them, an opportunity to do so.
That's awesome. I've read quite a bit of Zig Ziglar, and one of the things that he shares is that the more that we help others achieve their goals, the more that people are willing to help us achieve ours. And it's that giver's gain mentality that I love, because you found a way to give, but also it's helping you reach a different level of understanding, right? That introspection that we take a look or a step back from our busy lives, running around with kids and family and work and all those things. And now you've taken a moment to get real. And I think that's powerful. And I really appreciate the fact that not only have you done that for your circle of influence, but when we spoke about this, you were like, you offered an opportunity to connect with my daughter, who's in the mental sports performance consultant world. And, she's excited to talk with you about some of these things. So I wanted to thank you for that. It certainly, it helps us to connect with our family as we can share those opportunities with others.
Yeah, no, thanks, Simon. Like we had said, I'm glad that came up in our conversation, because it sounds like she's doing some amazing work, and that's something obviously I have experience in, and we're working a little bit in the athlete space. And I do think that, all of us, and it's always not age dependent, go through a lot of, things in our lives that, we feel that, while there are struggles for us, we may not learn from them at the time, but we understand that at some point, if given the opportunity, that by sharing those experiences, good and bad, we can help others. And I truly believe that, we're sitting on a tremendous resource, of shared lived experiences that can be shared in a proper way that will help others, navigate not only current challenges, but other challenges that we all go through as we kind of traverse this life.
Yeah. So this is actually, I want to take a moment to go back in your life, Scott, and really talk about the moment you were a professional hockey player. Firstly, I find that fascinating. And then the transition from a hockey player to the mortgage industry. I think, one of the questions I would like to ask you, Scott, is, what did hockey teach you about, perseverance, success, challenges, and really shaping, your mindset?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking the question. I think, like, looking back at it, and probably at the time I didn't understand it as well, but being able to reflect back on it, I understand, obviously, with anything, whether it's work or whether it's sports, the higher level you get, the more you probably have to engage in terms of development of whatever skills you have, whether it's work or sports, right? Because people just get better, right? And, I think that taught me a little bit more of a, hey, a little bit, I'm grateful for the opportunity and the fact that I had enough talent to play high school hockey, college hockey, professional hockey. When I look back at it, did I use the best, did I take advantage of or really take that opportunity to fullest? Probably not, but that's something I didn't think of at the time. And I think, like anything else, to excel or, to do well on anything, it just takes a little bit more energy and focus. And I think that, if you think about it, that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned after the fact, right? You just can't, go into anything half-baked and expect tremendous amount of results. And another top of that is that you can control those variables in terms of effort, dedication, focus, but there's a lot of things you can't control, and just being able to learn from those in terms of, hey, I put in the time and this didn't work, right? And don't be sad about it, right? There's percentages in everything we do. But the biggest lesson I learned is, in order to increase those percentages of success in anything, sometimes you just got to grind through the hard times and put more time into the little things that, hopefully make a difference.
So transitioning from, sports to the mortgage industry is no small feat, right? So may I ask, what inspired you to enter the mortgage industry?
Inspiration, there probably was not a lot of. Okay. It was actually, and I love that question, right? I was looking for a job. I was, getting tired of being, punched in the face and, spending long hours on buses, and it was beautiful, and I loved it at the time. But there was a time where I felt like, hey, I need to move, to the next chapter of my life, and. And I'll go back and say, and I've never interviewed for a job in my life. Like, I was given a job and given the opportunity to enter the mortgage space, which I knew nothing of, from a very close friend in college whose brother-in-law had run a mortgage company.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm extremely grateful for that opportunity. The transition, now that I look back at it, was rough, right? And it's nothing against the company, nothing against, it being something totally foreign for me. It was just rough. It was something that I was unfamiliar with, and being told no and not now, and who are you? You're too young. All those little things were really rough, almost to an extent that, after the first year or so in the industry, I was literally mentally like, this is not for me. I need to look elsewhere, and started to look for another, job or profession in New York, which thankfully, certain things happened where I stayed put and kind of went through the grind and kind of got a little bit more familiar with the industry, and managed to, put together a pretty nice, couple of decade career in that space.
That mortgage space can be rewarding, but it's certainly not easy, Scott. I know that I've been doing it now for 26 years, and there's been peaks and valleys, but certainly I've learned the grit and the resilience. When the good times are good, you just keep making hay when the sun's shining. And when it's more difficult, you do better networking, you do more marketing, you try and stay connected. And we created this podcast as a way to kind of share those stories and share some of those lessons, and open it up not only just in the real estate and mortgage world, but also outside of that. And you have also created another avenue to help others, which is Edge for Athletes. And I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about what that means and how you help others with that.
No, yeah, thanks. And so Edge is an acronym: education, direction, guidance, backed by experience. And it goes exactly into what Devin had asked in terms of the transition, right? Like, I didn't realize it at the time, but the transition was rough.
Sure.
Right? And I handled that transition probably not the best, but I got through it. And I started to, given that I'm going on 54 later this month, given that I've spent a lot of time coaching youth hot sports, given a lot, being engaged with college sports and such, I started to hear a lot from friends whose children were playing college athletics, in terms of the struggles that they went through, just because they're able to play college athletics while also going through, college itself and all the challenges there. And that I started to hear a lot from friends and others that, these kids need mentors. And I started to realize that, while there are a lot of resources out there, and that's great for anybody going through transition, that a lot of times, given, the state of just the world right now in terms of technology and, more things coming at people as we age, that a lot of these young, college athletes aren't working on some of the things that would better equip them for that transition later on in their career, right? I'm not there to tell, we're not there to tell college athletes that there's a 1% chance that you're ever going to lace the skates up after college. Right. It's just to better prepare them while they're engaged in sports, and then through that transition after, working on soft skills, working on just knowing yourself better, but also plugging them into a network of other athletes that have gone through those challenges, that have succeeded, that have failed, but most importantly, that have learned, and be able to share that advice with the next generation of college athletes coming through the system, so to speak.
Scott, because from what I'm hearing and what I've read and done some research on, it sounds like the fact that you're a mentor in many different avenues in your life is exceptional. And my question on that is, did you have a mentor, in your hockey career? Did you have a mentor, in your mortgage career? Because I'd like to see where that switch in your brain went, I would love to be a mentor and give back to people that really need it.
Yeah, I would say no.
Okay.
It was kind of, I would say either. I mean, later on, after the first few years,
okay,
through coaching, right?
Right.
Obviously, some of the mentorship, the corporations that I worked for in the mortgage space, there was coaching. Obviously, you can go and seek coaching yourself. So I would say, later on, but not in that transition, not previous to the transition, not, making, a lot, not understanding how challenging sometimes that transition or those transitions can be. So early on, no. And you know what? That may have been my fault, not saying, hey, there are people out there that can help me through this early on
Right.
that I can find, right? And that's, going back 30 plus years. So initially, no. Eventually, yeah, I think in terms of, especially in the mortgage space, working with people that had found a way to navigate a successful mortgage career, yes, later on, but early on at the beginning, which is a really critical point, right?
Right.
For anybody going through a life stage transition, whether it's becoming a new mom, becoming recently divorced, becoming, coming out of athletes, coming out of the military. And I think that while there's a lot of things out there that are reactive in terms of at time and point of when you make that transition, there needs to be more proactiveness in it in terms of saying, hey, let's equip you while you're in this part of your life for the next part of your life.
Absolutely.
And that goes into the whole planning phase, right? So when we plan for what our next steps are, or when we're younger, we don't know what those next steps are. So having that mentor and having someone to kind of lead and guide us. And someone recently just reached out to me, Scott, that touched both of our lives, who was a founder of one of the mortgage companies that we worked for. And he wanted me to send a shout out to you from the old Windsor financial days. Dan Leinhauser, who he and I have stayed in contact. And he said, make sure that you know that he sends his best out to you. And he certainly shared a lot of really great memories with me and with our team through the years. So Dan sends his best, and he was excited to hear the podcast that we've done. He's watched a couple of other units that we've done through Instagram or through LinkedIn. So Dan's somebody that really helped me in my career through the mortgage world and kind of provided an antidote in some of those stories based on what he had gone through. So I think that edge for athletes provides something that helps them to bridge that unknown, right? That next level, whatever that may be. And just being able to talk through it, sometimes it's not about providing all the solutions, right? It's just helping them to craft their version or their view of what they're going through and what they've already gone through.
Yeah, well put. And I would say, like, as I mentioned, no, in terms of having a mentor, like when I first entered the space or before, that right. I could definitely throw Dan into one of those folks that was open and willing to share his experiences and talk at any time. Like he goes into that bucket, I would say, of there couldn't be a nicer guy or it couldn't be a nicer, woman. He's one of the most solid people I know. So thanks for bringing that up. And it does
Absolutely.
go into so thanks for bringing that up. And I keep, contact with him loosely, but thanks for sharing that.
So Scott, you had mentioned you've had the opportunity to be involved with your kids through sports as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so not to my pressing in terms of, I played hockey for a good part of my life. It wasn't like my kids have to play hockey, right? Under the understanding and let them explore a bunch of things, whether it's dance, whether it's, Girl Scouts, whether it's field hockey. Interesting enough that my daughter got involved in hockey, not because I was saying, geez, she's 4 or 5. She has to start skating now if she ever wants to play hockey. She actually, and I hope she doesn't one day, nudge me on this or be upset about it, is she came home one day and she had as much as somebody could have a crush on somebody when you're in first grade, she had a crush on another boy hockey player, and that inspired her to want to play hockey. And just like that, my son, a couple years ago, my wife signed him up. Like I'm all for it. I'm not for, I think people, especially kids, while we can guide them and support them, we support them in everything, whether it's field hockey, whether it's, playing a little bit of golf, whatever it is, swimming, diving, dance. We've done that. And I truly believe, and I hope, in one way, shape or form, this works out for the best of them, as they traverse kind of their early childhood. Is like, let them experience a lot, and let them understand, when you get to the points where you need to start making commitments to a team, let them understand what that's about, and just like take their temperature from time to time. And if they're not enjoying it, if they're not, if they're not going with a smile on their face, which they're not all the time, right?
Sure.
Is give them other options, right? And fortunately, I love the sport of hockey. I've coached it since I retired, in the late 90s. And I love the fact that my kids are like really engaged in it and really seem to like it. It's been a joy for me, and it could be any sport. I'd support them in any way we could, but hockey seems to be like their sport of choice right now. Although our younger ones kicking the soccer ball around, basketball, let him do and find his own way and support them however we can.
I love that. I had an opportunity to coach both my kids in soccer. I played growing up, and, I played up through high school, didn't play in college, but, shared that with them. And kind of at first it was just play in the backyard, and then telling stories about athletics. And both my kids played basketball and soccer in high school and had really successful runs through that. And when it came time to go to college, they had opportunities to play in college, and both of them decided to just be students in college. And I supported that, but secretly I was a little disappointed because I wanted to continue to watch them play. Mm-hmm. So, as young adults, they're now playing in young adult or adult leagues now in soccer. And I've had that opportunity to continue to watch them play. But it's great watching them grow up and be a part of that journey, even though it changes, right? But our influence, the mentorship, and seeing how we did that and how we kind of share those experiences with them helps them to shape into who they become, right? We don't want to tell them what to do, but we want to give them an opportunity to grow. And that's what we're so excited about, sharing these stories of hope, Scott.
Yes.
And I wanted to tell you that, in sharing these things, when we go through the lows, it makes the highs seem all that much better. And I think you should be really proud of how you transitioned and where you put value after you went through something that was really difficult to handle. And you should be proud of that. And, it's certainly something that we appreciate you sharing the time and the energy Absolutely. To share this with us. And I'd like to share a quote with you from David Frankel. That we each week we try to share a quote that has impact and value. And I think it aligns with what we've been talking about here. And it says, man does not simply exist, but always decides what his existence will be. What will he become the next moment? By the same token, every human being has the freedom to change at any instant. And I think what's interesting is sometimes we don't get to choose those instances. Sometimes they're thrust upon us and our life changes in a heartbeat. But we have the ability to evolve, to grow, to rise and elevate above these challenges, to make ourselves something better or greater. And your contribution to athletes, to people that have gone through challenges, I think is rewarding personally. And I love to see what you've done over the past few years. So thank you for being a part of our podcast today and sharing your stories.
No, I appreciate it. I truly, like when you say in the same lane, I love what you're doing. Everything from the name to the episodes I've watched. I love it. I think that the more out there that you can bring on and share their stories and kind of how they've gone through their challenges and learn from them or not learn from them, I think the better. I think what you're doing is much needed in our society in general. And I applaud you both for putting this together. I think it's great.
Thank you so much for giving me goosebumps, Scott.
We love the goosebumps. Scott, I'd like to ask you one more question before we close the episode, if that's all right with you. And my question is, what philosophy or what saying would you provide somebody that needs guidance and help really navigating, the challenges that we face every day, both professionally and personally?
Ooh,
it's a good one.
There's a lot. If I need to just move on, in short, keep going.
Yes.
And I think that let me provide a little more clarity on that. I think, with what we do and with what we've been discussing is, reach out to somebody, right? Like, we're born with resiliency. We're born with this stick-to-itiveness, right? And that can get us far. But at times we need to kind of throw in that towel a little bit and reach out for help, whatever that is, right? Because there are good people like yourselves and others out there that will spend the time, take the time to help you navigate it. Like, you don't need to navigate this life alone, and if you believe in something and it's well grounded in your values and your morals and your ethics, all that sort of stuff, keep going.
I think that's a perfect way to end this. How about you, Tom?
I think it's fantastic. Together, we can accomplish so much more. Scott, thanks again for your time, your energy, your ideas, your thoughts, and for all you're doing to help others navigate their journey.